You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my talkative, chatty, and never quiet co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Super excited to get started today. Ivan, why don't you go ahead and start chatting?
Hi, I'm Ivan Zach. I want to hear you do a podcast without me. Then it'll be just quiet. So,
You should check out our webinars. The Talk to webinars are really excellent.
all right. Well, I am excited to introduce a colleague of mine, Dr. Sonja Olson. Dr. Olson is a full-time veterinary wellness educator at BluePearl Veterinary Partners and the founder of Heartstorming Wellness. She has 20 years of experience as an emergency clinician and educator, followed by the supporting talent acquisition endeavors as the health and well-being team was just developed over the last 4 years. Dr. Olson is seeking to foster connections and collaborative conversations with vet well-being allies and champions so that they can create initiatives and strategies promoting the health of veterinary ecosystems and the thriving of caregiving professionals. Dr. Olson, welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here, guys. Thank you so much.
So, well-being is a topic that I'm very interested in. And what is it that you do at Blue Pearl that is game changer and addressing it practically? Because a lot of people talk
Mm.
about things and not many people do things. So, what practical steps do you take at Blue Pearl to address the issue?
Yeah, excellent question. I think that's really the name of the game. We've been talking about this, and that's a piece of it, isn't it? Is raising awareness, increasing our literacy, developing our vocabulary around well-being concerns for caregivers. These aren't new, but I think that when it comes to what we're doing about it, we are fortunate to have thought to bring a multidisciplinary approach to this. That's new to veterinary medicine, where we are working with veterinary social workers and having veterinary professionals work together to address really what is in social work speak, doing what's called a needs assessment. What is happening in the environment? What's going on with the behavior of our people that's fostering healthy strategies or unhealthy? What are the dynamics at the individual level, the team level, and at the systems and organizational level? That's micro, meso, macro. So I've learned heaps from my veterinary social work community. Together, we are then looking at, well, if these are the concerns, how do we then bring facilitated discussions, actually creation of resources and trainings? How do we also encourage culture shifting towards something that's very important called psychological safety, which is an environment of growth, learning, innovation, where we lose fear and we lean into the vulnerability that's necessary for change. But that has to come step by step. And as we well know, veterinary culture historically has not fostered trust necessarily and vulnerability. So the work that we're doing, truthfully, is evolving. It is evolving. So we've started to implement a number of different things, which we can talk about today. But my role is very unique. Personally, right off the top of my head, I don't know of any other veterinarian currently that is in this role alongside a veterinary social work team in the world.
That's really cool. So, Sonja, this is a twisted, windy road, not a straight path, not something that people have done before. I would imagine a lot of what you're doing is skiing in fresh snow. So, what have some of the early wins been with the work that you've been doing? And how can maybe our listeners learn from those early wins and maybe implement some of the things that you've done at Blue Pearl?
Yeah, this is great. I love that analogy, by the way, fresh snow. It's a beautiful image. So I think that the beautiful thing about what we're doing is that we're hoping to create, and to some degree, something that is repeatable, that can be a template for other teams. Veterinary social work is still a very new conversation to our veterinary industry, starting at academic institutions, now moving into private practice. So that's a space where we are helping to perhaps explore, what could this be? What does that look like? How do we bring veterinary social work in at the practice level, maybe at a teams and a regional level and an organizational level for businesses of different sizes? So exploring that. How do the veterinary professionals themselves in the hospital, as well as individuals like myself that are not specifically in the hospital but acting as a liaison, how do we create ease of communication and understanding so we hear from what our associates are experiencing in need, and then how do we meet those needs as a community of people who have knowledge and resources. So this is the beautiful space that I think we're discovering, trying to put data to it. So we've started to gather data over the last several years so that we can tell our story, and hopefully that would be informative to other teams that are curious about this, to bring, I hope, a degree of mitigation to the suffering that we might be likely to experience as caregivers in the highly emotional environments of veterinary medicine. Doesn't matter small animal, large animal, doesn't matter where you are in the world. The conversations we're having with colleagues all over the world, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, you name it, we're all experiencing similar things. So how do we bring this conversation to life? As Ivan said, how do we actuate what we are learning?
This is excellent. You said my favorite word. I don't remember who said it.
Ivan, was that your favorite word?
There we go. You
Nice.
get a certificate from Shawn if you pick on me.
This is going to be a longer episode.
No, but I remember who said, "In God we trust. The rest bring data." So you said you're taking a data approach to it, and that's what I've been struggling with when I talk to a lot of consolidators. Everybody talks about well-being. We're taking care of our veterinarians one way or the other. My favorite question: how do you measure that? So, are there metrics that you are discovering on an individual, on the team, or on the organizational level that you can actually attribute to improving the well-being, and then those metrics that can show that it's actually effective?
Early days is the honest truth. So as we start to gather data, it's through the form of us as a team individually gathering information on who are we serving, what role do they have on the team, what was the conversation that we had. It's all very qualitative, isn't it, when we're talking about well-being? That's part of the problem when we're trying to gather data. So we just have to be absolutely honoring confidentiality as we go, but looking for themes, looking for what was the impact of that conversation. Did we increase engagement? Did we decrease turnover? Do we see that people are healthier overall? What's the team dynamic? Is there increased efficiency? Is there decreased incivility? Is there a feeling from the leaders that there is increased professional development interest and leaning into learning and growth? The place that we have surveys historically that's a rich space for us initially to get data to point to is our training programs. When we look at our house officer programs, they have mid-year and exit year surveys. So that's a beautiful space for us to get data on, not the actual number data specifically, but it's again the themes, what's working, what do we need to do more of, and where are we meeting the mark. So we're trying to do that. Now, the data that we're gathering with us as teammates submitting forms and gathering the numbers, we're looking at the number of people that we're touching. We're looking to see what those themes are so that that helps us develop those resources. And then we'll do that and we'll keep collecting the data to see if those numbers change. So early days on the what we're looking at and the how. I will say, though, that very specific data is around, we're part of an ACVEC study, well-being study with one of our hospitals, where we received a grant from the society, and it is very specifically a well-being study to see whether having a daily mindfulness practice makes a difference in the way these individuals are feeling. We're utilizing the ProQoL survey on a regular basis, which is a professional quality of life survey. It's a well understood measure of compassion, satisfaction, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout. So we're using that as well as also data coming in the form of qualitative. 6-month period, and we'll be actually delivering the abstract at IVEX in September. So early days.
Yeah, super duper cool. So I guess I have a couple questions again. So first one is, what level of support do you have from the executive at BluePearl to go after these initiatives? Because it seems very much, like you said, it's early days. We don't know the answer. So how did this all come about within your organization? I guess that's my first question. I have a follow-on.
I think that I would say that this is important for many people to hear because the journey is not, as you said, has been very twisty, turny, spaghetti style. It has not been something that's been straightforward. I think as a veterinary community, we didn't really even acknowledge that we had concerns. We didn't know what to call them. And that was really only around 2014, 2015 that I would say that we really started as a community to hear the words like compassion, fatigue, and burnout from our human medical caregiving communities. We were like, oh, that's interesting. That sort of applies to what I think is happening here in our communities. Our senior leadership teams, not just BluePearl, everywhere, was just trying to wrap their heads around, well, what do you mean well-being? What are you pointing to? What's happening? It was very difficult to articulate what that was. So it was hard to explain. And there was zero data, zero for veterinary. So trying to explain the ROI to invest in the salaries of well-being individuals was a tough sell, very tough sell. And what shifted was that the community at large was becoming more aware and the vocabulary was developing. You had individuals like myself who had a lived experience and was just learning on the fly, gathering information as I could to fortify myself and to fortify me as a mentor and ally to others, to minimize suffering, quite truthfully, for myself and others, and a squeaky wheel saying, we need to pay attention to this. We need to bring some awareness and do something. Not sure what that something is yet, but let's keep talking. Partnering with a hospital that had veterinary social workers in place is what happened. That finally was the aha. They had had a lived experience there in that very large hospital of approximately 400 associates in Pittsburgh of applying veterinary social work. They were then able to translate maybe what individuals like myself had been saying to my senior leadership in a different way, that it was heard. And it was really, quite truthfully, just the synergy of all of those things at that time. That was 2018, late 2018, when that started to come into place. So I feel like there has been an enormous amount of progress in the last several years at academic institutions, at our organizational levels. AVMA has been super active. Many of our VMAs have been active. British Veterinary Association, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, they're all really leaning into this now. So I feel like the shift in listening has occurred, but it was a bit of a slog, Shawn. It was a bit of a slog.
That's super great. So I guess my follow-on question is more of a practical kind of like double click on this idea of psychological safety. And so inside the practice, a practicing veterinarian, maybe just having an incredibly difficult mental health day. And I think there's a lot of people that would call into the practice and say, I've got a cold, I'm not feeling well, I can't come in. How do we shift the dynamic to make it okay to not be okay?
Yeah, that is a beautiful question because I want that for us. I want us to be able to show up as our authentic selves and to say, I am struggling with, and to not be judged, not to be seen as that being a permanent fixture of your being, and to be seen through that lens forever. That's a real concern for our professional community. We have a real perfectionist tendency, as we know, and help seeking is very low. We know that as well. When we lean to help seeking, we seek each other out. We seek out our colleagues. We do not turn towards professional resources historically. We hope to shift that conversation. But how do we prepare our colleagues? How do we shift the culture in the hospital so that we are better able to see one another as amazing, compassionate, but human caregivers that experience human things? Part of it comes with preparation of language and a shift in our thinking. We have started to utilize a very useful mental health first aid training strategy to start bringing that conversation to life. It's all about decreasing stigma, increasing awareness and literacy, and leaning into the discomfort of these conversations, but with a little bit more preparation and skill so we're not so scared to lean into that. That's for our associates, that's for our leaders, and so we're sharing the language. That's a part of it. So using evidence-based trainings to help people feel more prepared and less concerned that they're going to do harm or that they won't be able to fix, so don't open up the conversation. Saving lives. And along the way, that may, before we get to such a dramatic thing as saving lives, maybe it's just improving lives so they don't go to the point of feeling like they're cracking.
So I want to kind of shift a little bit onto more pragmatic sort of track here. So one of the things that you said that is interesting is how do we prove the ROI. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3.5 years, trying to prove the industry that there is a direct economic impact. Things that I use is that there's 40% of veterinarians want to leave the profession. And the number
Right.
one reason is lack of work-life balance, not money. The other one is that if you do lose a veterinarian after acquisition in the consolidation world, then you're losing literally $500,000 because it takes statistically about 10 months to restore a veterinarian, and their revenue from
Mm-hmm.
them is $600,000 to $700,000. Very, very direct correlation. So I think that those are the things that we're able to calculate now and see the impact. But one thing that I know you're passionate about this, and I want to hear your angle on how veterinarians perceive this. So the question of meditation, and even beyond that, the gratitude practices and things like that. So when I burned out myself and almost lost my life through the experience, and the fundamental change that needed to happen with me is actually going to the route of more sort of a mental, spiritual, if you will, well-being. And it took me, I would say, 6 or 7 years to understand the value of meditation, how it affects
Mm.
me personally, and what am I seeking in it, because it's not an easy practice. It's not, it's not physiotherapy. It's not, you need to, stretch before
Right.
exercising. It's a very difficult concept for me as an emergency clinician. And I wasn't ever the very religious person. I respect all religions, but I was not. And the meditation was something close to that for me. And then being so practical as an emergency vet, understanding that this meditation practice will help me. Now I'm absolutely convinced, and this is my daily routine. But do you get resistance? How did you arrive to this, understanding that this actually works and there is a scientific proof that this works? So there's a lot in there, but if you can unpack that a little bit.
I think we could probably have an entire podcast just on this, to be to be honest. No, it's a rich topic because meditation concepts are still fairly new overall to the West, number one. Number two, when we look at how they have been implemented in human medical environments and curriculums, it's really not, it's new. It's 1970s, 1980s that really started to have a place. And John Kabat-Zinn and others with their mindfulness-based stress reduction took a lot of time and energy to research and to demonstrate with many different things, lots of different studies and functional MRIs and cortisol level assays, many ways of actually trying to gather data to prove. We understand we're working with a scientific community that wants to have some data, please. Show us why. Why should we invest our energy and our time in something like this? I want to know that it's worth my while, particularly, as you say, if they're not coming from a particularly spiritual background, or if they are and they think that that is adequate, that why would I want to do this on top of that? Well, because what we have learned in not every practice and not every human doing it the different ways, but we do come to understand, for example, you mentioned gratitude. Gratitude works in a very different part of our brain, and it literally shifts our neurobiochemistry. It taps into our vagal and in our parasympathetic nervous systems. So there's absolute research and data now, which continues to grow, to demonstrate what happens to us at a cellular level, and super cool, what's happening with our neural networks. We have an increased understanding that neurons that fire together wire together. The plasticity of the human brain, even as an adult learner, is fascinating. So, why meditation and why these practices? Because I feel like they complement other things that people may already be doing. They can be added in an individualistic way, in small ways, medium ways, and maybe larger ways, depending on what suits you. So, whether that's a guided meditation practice that you do 1 minute a day, or maybe you listen to something like the Calm app as you're winding down, you're easing your anxiety out of your body so you can get good sleep. These things matter. So, taking care of ourselves holistically, why wouldn't we want to look at every potential tool that might serve us? For me, like you, coming into a space where I recognize that emergency medicine and I can no longer play in the same sandbox, my body was not going to take it. I physiologically was not okay. I could not put my finger on exactly all the reasons why. I just knew, quite truthfully, I was on a fast track to heart attack. I could feel it. I was having cardiac arrhythmias. I was starting to experience GERD, that just the regurgitation up because your tummy's not okay. My guts were not okay. Did not know, didn't have the name for it at the time, that I was in adrenal fatigue. Did not know that I was in such a state of neuroendocrine imbalance. Now I understand. And with great compassion, I'm like, oh, sister, geez, you really did a number on yourself. But it took years to heal. And part of that healing was me declaring that I was worth living, that I have more value than just as Sonja Olson, the emergency clinician. So giving myself permission to explore, how do I heal? What does that look like? And it was multimodal. I do feel, though, that looking into the meditation practices was a piece of that. I've continued to develop that. That's why I am now just completing that 2-year certification that I mentioned to you around mindful meditation teacher certification. I want to understand how to bring this to all the different humans in a language and in a way that is accessible and relevant. Not in a preachy way, but in a I'm a fellow human who understands suffering and I want you to suffer less kind of a way.
That's incredible. Yeah, so great. It always is so annoying when you have like 4 questions and you reach 20 minutes, but that's what's happened here. We're at time. We have a promise to our listeners to kind of be digestible and be 20 minutes. So we like to end every episode in the same way, Sonja. First, by thanking you for showing up, because it was a really great conversation today. And we've got a couple questions to wrap up. So first is, a book, a YouTube video, something that you found inspiring, or maybe that you wrote that potentially think might inspire others?
Softball here.
Go ahead.
Oh, thanks for that. No, I am delighted to share that my book, Creating Wellbeing and Building Resilience, A Call to Life, was published by Routledge Publishers in March of this year. So it's
Congratulations.
available on Amazon. Thank you. It was absolutely a labor of love. And the key thing here is that it is such a Sonja passion project. It comes from my compassionate heart, bringing our community together as just people that I care so deeply about. I love this profession and I want to see us thrive. It's a community collaborative conversation in the book as well. So I have quotes in there from friends and et cetera. So it's a journey of well-being. But the other book I did want to mention, I thought you guys might dig, because I hear you talking about intrinsic motivation, is the Manifesto for a Moral Revolution, Practices to Build a Better World by Jacqueline Novogratz. All about what moves you. What is your why? What is the purpose for you? This book is an amazing resource and insight into somebody who has dedicated her life to exploring all over the world these amazing innovations from people and communities, just recognizing a need and meeting that need. And she and her community are bringing the financial resources and collective educational, experiential need to those endeavors, and so that they can flourish. So, love that book.
Thank you for those recommendations, and thank you for dedicating time and writing the book about specifically this in our profession. The second question that we asked, is there a guest that you think that would be interesting to invite to this show?
I took the time to review who all you'd already talked to. So
Oh,
I
wow,
see you've
that's a
talked to
lot of work.
many wonderful people, and some who I know, some who I didn't, but I've listened to your podcast many times. I would say
Thank you.
that there's somebody that I would really love to hold up, and she's become a good friend, Dr. Timbrala Marshall. She is a VCA. She is the head of their equity and diversity initiatives. I feel like this is a very important conversation. We are very new and young to the equity, inclusion, diversity conversation. And somebody like Timbrala, who brings such passion and experience to the conversation, and she is just a fierce workhorse around this. So I would love for her to have an opportunity to share her learnings and her passion with you all in your audience.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.